Good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. This beautiful, is it a Tuesday morning? Yes, just to be sure. I'm Ayo Makinde. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. It's pleasant to be here. Welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And from Abuja, good morning. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, so many things are pleasant these days. As you can see at this moment on this program, I'm outnumbered. It's 2 against 1. 2 women, and I'm the only man here at this moment. And I don't know how they'll feel right now in the UK Parliament.
Where are you headed? Okay, you're headed for the UK.
Yes. You know, the, should we say, anointed candidate for post of PM
has emerged.
Okay.
And isn't it a pleasant thing, by the way, you know, especially because the UK Parliament has a healthy women participation in its political environment, unlike what we see here. And we're looking forward to, you know, Liz Truss being assertive, you know, and championing the policies that will, you know, entrench, that will improve the economic fortunes of the UK, which has experienced some of its own, you know, economic challenges in recent times, coming off on the back of, you know, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Gas prices are set to increase, you know, just to mention a few of the challenges in the UK. So we're looking forward to a strong woman streak in UK politics.
When you say strong woman streak, I just remember Margaret Thatcher at this moment. But you know, Mark, I don't know what your take is. There are so many issues all over the world. The UK is most certainly not the least of countries that will be interested in how things are supposed to go in different parts of the world. So when one looks at the fact that, okay, so now we have a woman as head of government, as it would seem, Prime Minister in the UK, one is wondering what the odds are, really. Just which day was it we were talking about? 7 women governors sworn in Kenya or so, and a number of other countries are celebrating that. Well, I'm not even going to talk about how soon we'll have that in our country yet, but what the opportunities are for women all over the world.
Buki, I think we should just bask in this moment. Should just, you know, I mean, I don't know why Ayo thinks it's 2 against 1. What is against there?
It is. Come on.
Why do you perceive it as an against?
Well, you're
why
2
not
over
2
me.
For 1? How about that?
Okay.
When it's the other way around, do we say 3 against 1?
I'll think about that.
Ayo, you should be he for the she on the program.
I am he for she, but at the same time, I should be able. It's the obvious thing. Okay, so
Buki, I didn't hear what you said.
Ayo should be a he for she on this platform. He shouldn't feel like it's a 2 against 1 kind of thing. Well, for him,
I don't know what the against is about, you know.
But it's fine.
But for me, if you ask me, I think that I like how the UK is beginning to normalize, you know, seeing women as their prime minister. We saw very recently, I mean, for those for whom Margaret Thatcher is history. I mean, like really, really long ago, a lot of people didn't even get to know who Margaret Thatcher was. Yeah. But at least they've seen in recent history, Theresa May, they have a Queen of England. I mean, there's a whole series on Netflix to explain the life of the Queen and how she started, the challenges that she had, etc., and where she currently is at. I mean, how many seasons of The Crown watching on Netflix? What great lessons they have there. But I love the fact that the UK is beginning to normalize having a female prime minister. It was a really tough battle. And listening to her yesterday saying, thank you for one of the longest and toughest job interviews. She said it was well worth it. I mean, look at since when Boris Johnson said he was going to resign after the scandals that were revealed. She also still paid tribute to him, paid tribute to her long-running her rival, her competitor, Ruji Sunak, who, you know, also gave her quite a fight. So it was not a thing of, oh, we how do I put it now? This is not an affirmative action thing. This was a battle well fought and well won. So I think it's certainly one up for the women, showing that they too are bringing some mettle to the game. Before now, she was Foreign Secretary in the, let me quickly just confirm that to you now. She was Foreign and Commonwealth Development Affairs Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs since 2021. So she is somebody who certainly has experience counting for her, but it's just wonderful to see how the UK is normalizing seeing females at the head, at the helm of affairs, and also the fact that, you know, increasingly we're seeing more and more women in the UK Parliament. How that is going to be reflected in terms of, will I say, how they have been able to make that much progress is something that I think a lot of other countries, other democracies can copy. And see how much progress that they too can make. It's not to say that right here on the African continent, we do not have countries that are doing well. Rwanda is always a beautiful instance to cite. I think Uganda too is also showing some example in that regard. Kenya was celebrating not too long ago. When will Nigeria celebrate? Well, we thought we had something to celebrate, but in recent times in our parliament, we've just been seeing the number of women declining. And we're thinking that some affirmative action would help in that regard. That's not because women are not able to prove their mettle, but because we see that there are obstacles that generally stand in the way of women. Let us see how we learn to normalize these things, how women too are able to prove their mettle as time goes on, and how we're able to learn from the example that, you know, the UK has provided in this regard. But we certainly wish the Prime Minister well. She has her work cut out for her. She says she's going to be tackling energy. The energy crisis is a big deal in the UK. It's crippling businesses. The cost of living crisis is, you know, a big deal for a lot of people in the UK as we speak. And she certainly knows that her honeymoon period, if at all, is going to be a really short one. So we wish her well and hope that the people of the United Kingdom, you know, have chosen well in their choice of Liz Truss as the third female Prime Minister.
Third of 55 Prime Ministers that the UK has had over in all down through its history. So number 10 Downing has a new occupant, it will seem, and, you know, good for the country. One thing that I like that you said, Mokwe, is merit over anything else at this point. She had a very tough job interview, it would seem. I wish we would have such processes in the selection of Senate President, in the selection of House of Representatives Speaker. Let's start from somewhere. Maybe we'll build up from there. If women get the day at that job interview, then a woman Senate President it is. What do you think? Let's know what your comments are in an email that you may want to send to us. In the meantime, let's switch to the papers, see what they say on the lead. First paper to look at this morning is This Nigeria, and it starts with a story on Lagos. Of course, that's what you have there. Death toll in Lagos building collapse rises to 5 as commissioner resigns after multiple collapses. Whoa. Is that a first? Story is on page 9 of the paper today.
Sounds like it. First.
Well, most certainly, I don't know, but that's not to say that the needful wasn't done. That's not to say that government agencies didn't do what they were supposed to do. But then here is a commissioner fully taking responsibility. Well, let's see how this builds up, in the next few days. And still talking about Lagos, we understand that there was a horrible accident on the Kara Bridge end of the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, outward Lagos, this morning, and there's a huge backlog of traffic. Let's hope that the authorities are there to do the needful. Now, we talked about the UK Prime Minister. Well, that's her picture on the front page as well. It's Truss. Can we trust her as worthy partner for Nigeria and Africa? Yeah, this Nigeria, I see what you did there. Play on letters or words.
So it is now. Can we trust Truss to be Nigeria's worthy partner?
Exactly. That's the lead of the paper, the picture on the front page, and several other stories. 31 years after, Abia gets first flyover. Oh, okay. That story is on page 5, Wike Lords, Ibazu, and so many other stories you'll find on the front page of This Nigeria Today.
And there are many interesting stories on the front page of the Daily Trust, if you will turn with me. First of all, let's look at the big story before we go beneath the nameplate. Will eliminate all terrorists by December. Will eliminate all terrorists by December.
In other words, we will eliminate all terrorists within 4 months.
Within 4 months. So,
But maybe we need to go into the story. Which December?
December 2023, I believe.
How do you know?
We don't need to go that far.
I just want to...
We only need to wait till December to hold the federal government to its word. Well, let's take a look at the riders. Says worst of insecurity is over. Counterinsurgency, not fair fight. That's according to the defense minister. Economic reforms must support military offensive. Well, that's attributed to security experts. So there must be a relationship between economic reforms and military offensive, which is spot on. You can't have a thriving economy where there is lack of, where there's insecurity.
Sine qua non, as to say.
Okay, so that's the big story. Let's go now beneath the nameplate. You'll find these ones. Death toll now 372 as flooding spreads to 33 states. That's happening in the FCT. I believe when Marquette takes some of those Abuja papers, we'll have more insight as to what's happening there. There's this one also. Police burst Ogun baby factory where men are hired to impregnate girls. Oh, well, there's a huge erosion of our values where this baby factory thing is concerned. It seems to be thriving, not just in the southeast now, but across regions now, even in the southwest. Something decisive must be done about it to check this. There must be a deliberate attempt to engage the youth so that this will not be, an option that will be considered by the youths. Men
are hired.
Hired.
I think that's the operative word there. Literally saying some people built an industry around it. So, well, let me believe that the police, having bossed them, have a job cut out for them.
Yeah. And lastly, before we leave the Daily Trust, Kuje prison security breached despite 65 well-armed personnel deployed, attributed to the minister. That's the Daily Trust newspapers for you. Malpe?
Well, New Telegraph is what I'm holding in my hand. I mean, I'm trying to get past that story you just read about men being hired to impregnate girls. I mean, that's a very disturbing story. And if you go and dig deep, there'll be sinister motives behind it. There's a whole underworld, very dark stories around that particular, that sort of headline, rituals, etc. A very disturbing story indeed. If you look at New Telegraph, they have this one: fuel scarcity looms as marketers threaten strike over 76 billion naira debt, say they pay over 1.7 million naira to operate each truck. The story is on page 2. We saw that on the news yesterday, Ipman threatening to down tools, but the story said it was Ipman in Nasarawa. I'm not very sure if that's Ipman all over the country, but perhaps page 2 of the paper will give you details. Fuel scarcity looms as marketers threaten strike over 76 billion naira debt. Who's owing this money? Page 2 will give you details. You have a number of other stories here at the bottom. Insecurity, why Buhari is against use of mercenaries by federal government. Nigeria records 91,000 casualties in 11 years, average of 813 deaths. These are human beings per month. Terrorists abduct 7 million naira ransom bearer, threaten to kill DPO in Kaduna. Ondo burial guests kidnappers demand 90 million naira. DSS, DIA, others move to disrupt terrorist networks financing. They have all the details for you on pages 2, 3, 30, and 29. Nigeria bleeding from paucity of funds. That's according to reps. They also have the story, which we had taken earlier. UK, Liz Truss wins Conservative Party leadership to become next Prime Minister. And talking about that story which you had earlier, Buki, telecoms, government suspend proposed 5% excise duty. DMO releases bond issuance calendar. It's on pages 4 and 30. Yesterday, we saw the Minister for Communication, Issa Pantami, talking about why the federal government has chosen to suspend the 5% excise duty. And he was talking about how, the telecommunications industry already experiences about 41 different categories of taxes. You have to ask, didn't they know that? Whose proposal was this 5% excise duty in the first instance? If you know that an industry is already overtaxed, whose grand idea was it to introduce an extra 5% tax? I don't know. You might see the details on pages 4 and 30. You also have this one on top of the nameplate. CBN, Nigeria's projected oil earnings dipped by 28.3% to 799 billion naira. OPEC cuts October output by 26 million barrels per day. So it doesn't look like oil prices will be going down anytime soon if OPEC is cutting supply. But let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
41 taxes in just one sector. I wonder where we're going. Look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. Its front page is saying this. Wike accuses Atiku, Okowa, ASUU of sharing positions ahead 2023. I'm asking what position? Going by what our guest said yesterday. Hey, you're not even in the presidency yet. But hey, what do we know? Look at the writers. Vows to fight on as PDP holds crucial NEC meeting. NEC meeting shaky. Governors, BOT divided. Find out the details of that on the inside pages. 2023 about legacies, competencies, says Ikwazu. Move on. Wike, not political deity, PDP told. APC backs Tinubu over visit to Jonathan. I talk less, do more. Tinubu replies PDP. Propaganda will take no presidential candidate anywhere, says Agunloye. Find the details of that on the front page. Continues on page 6 of the paper this morning. A number of other stories that we've already had an inkling on. But that's the lead of the story. Look at page 8. Trial of parents, guardians of out-of-school children begins September 12. Did I read that right?
Trial?
Trial of parents and guardians of out-of-school children begins September 12. That's ascribed to Obaseki. Find the details of that on page 8 of the paper this morning.
You mean they'll be tried in courts?
The last time I checked, that's where trials happen.
Okay.
It's not a court-martial.
Okay, we'll just have to wait for that story to unfold before we begin to make up our minds as to what exactly the dynamics are. Why are they being tried? What are the issues? What are the accusations? Whose responsibility?
Trial of parents and guardians of out-of-school children.
Out of
In other
school
words,
children.
why are your children out of school?
Out of school.
Simple question. Again, and they will also say, but hey, that's a Guardian newspaper this morning.
From there, let's turn our attention to leadership newspapers this morning, and it also leads with politics. The PDP crisis still, and this is how it is captioned. PDP crisis, ASUU is going nowhere. Atiku's camp insists national chairman's removal will cause constitutional crisis in the party. That's according to one of the party spokesman and former Senator Dino Milai. Rivers people will decide who to support. That's according to the Rivers State Governor, Wike. South must produce PMB's successor, say Omwagege and Keyamo. That's the big story there for you. Let's now turn our attention to the stories on the right corner, just after the big story. And the conversation continues on local government authority or autonomy, as the case may be. Algon is speaking. That's the umbrella body for local government. And he says Algon appeals to FG states to recognize local governments as key actors. And we have already reported the emergence of Liz Truss as Prime Minister. We also have this one. Uneasy calm in Kenya as Supreme Court upholds Ruto's victory. Well, that appears to have been decided. And we saw the new president there in a Thanksgiving mood after the Supreme Court judgment. Well, I believe Kenyans must be satisfied with their choice. Don't let your guard down yet. Just before we exit Leadership newspaper, just above the nameplate, you see there Lassa fever, yellow fever, kill 183. Cases hit 7,650 in 36 states, including the FCT. That's the Leadership newspapers for you this morning.
And Vanguard has this, 48 hours to NEC meeting. Excuse me. PDP set for make or mar session. So we're still on with the politics. Just same way Leadership is also played that up as well. But it's a different take here. 48 hours to NEC meeting. PDP set for make or mar session. ASUU rallies against removal bid. PDP, APC crisis, blessings in disguise for Labour Party. Someone is speaking there. No one can break my bond with Makinde, Ikpeazu, Ugwuanyi, or Tom. That's according to Wike. We want proper share of our political positions, he says. 2023 is about Operation Show Your Walk. That's according to the governor of Abia State, Ikpeazu. So you find details on page 5 of the paper. There was some commissioning of was that a flyover bridge or was it a change? What they call that now? Interchange? Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't certain. It looked like a flyover bridge to me, even though I heard interchange. But page 5 will give you and it was in Abia State, just to clarify. The governor of Rivers State was invited to Abia State to commission that particular work. Look at this. Kuje prison attack. 65 well-armed operatives were on guard. Direct Beshola tells reps panel. So they have that for you as well. Insecurity, federal government defeating terrorists in Northeast, says Defense Minister. Cabinet resignations begin as Liz Truss becomes new UK Prime Minister. That is another angle. Fresh nationwide strike looms in power sector. Okay, that's something to take note of. You find details on page 9 of the paper. They have Vanguard Sports for you. Bruce Super Falcons confront USA again. That is also there. Fury calls out AJ for a huge battle of Britain. The story is right there. He's been wanting to fight Tyson Fury for a while. Who knows what the outcome of that is going to be? Is AJ ready mentally and physically after what happened with the fight with Usyk? I don't know. You might want to flip to the back page of Vanguard Sports and see for yourself. They also have your Mr. and Mrs. Mrs. trying to be of very great comfort to Mr. this morning. I don't know if it's working. You might want to pick up a copy of the Vanguard to see if Mrs. was successful. Let's leave it there for Vanguard newspapers.
I think it's about time we had Mr. and Mrs.com. Maybe that will help those people. Look at the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning, and it is some sort of warning, something to give us attention, really. FG, Present insecurity, Nigeria's greatest threat since civil war. That story you'll find on page 2. And look at the quote there. As far as the daunting security challenges we face are concerned, we can tell you that the worst is over. Never again will terrorists and bandits and their cohorts hold sway in our country. Find the details of that on page 2 of the paper this morning, and several other stories, trying to grab your attention right there. Of course, you see that picture on the front page of school children on resumption from third-term holiday in Lagos. Well, the sleeplessness for some moms, or early nights, early mornings.
Has resumed, you wanted to say. Please don't remind me.
Okay, and there's this rather unpleasant story on the front page, right above the nameplate. I am tired of this country. 14-year-old boy found inside parked aircraft says. The story is on page 4. He's 14.
Just 14. Well,
that's the Nigerian Tribune today.
Speaks to the socioeconomic situation, but then again, that was perhaps too much of a risk for a 14-year-old boy.
He's 14. We had an interview here once, and I was speaking with a psychiatrist who said children get to be depressed from as young as age 10. I said, what are they thinking? I said, no, they have their own battles as well. Hey, I couldn't argue with that, but 14-year-old certainly calls for attention for our kids and their future.
Speaks to, parenting and to what extent a parent's taking responsibility for, the mental well-being of their children. Well, you have to take a look at the Tribune to explore that story a bit more. Yeah. Let's quickly take Nigerian News Direct before we wrap up our newspaper review this morning. And it also leads with politics. APC, PDP battle over Tinubu's visit to Jonathan as parties contend over performance profile. Opposition rattled in panic. APC, we will focus on issues, not trading personal insults. That's attributed to the campaign council. It's really normal, really for both parties to battle over the influence that they both wield on, former President Goodluck Jonathan.
Good luck.
Especially when we're not quite sure which political party he belongs to. Ahead of the primaries, there was very big talk about him having defected to the APC. We're not quite sure about that because he never came out to confirm otherwise.
Whether APC or PDP are fighting over former President Jonathan, good luck to them.
Good luck to them. Okay, well, as Malfa read earlier, Labour Party considers it good fortune, considers this fight good fortune for it. So let's see how it plays out.
So someone has good luck.
In 7 months' time.
Someone has good luck at the end of the day.
Someone has good luck.
Okay.
In whose interest, as Malfa always asks. All right, a few more stories before we leave the Nigerian News Direct. If you go beneath the picture spread, you'll find this one. Kidnappers demand 90 million naira for Ondo victims. Over the weekend, there was a report that 32 travelers were abducted in Ondo, I think in Ose, local government to be precise. And the police public relations officer in that state confirmed the arrest of the travelers. We hope that they are released very soon, as the force in that state, according to reports, has started combing the forests in search of the kidnappers and, of course, to rescue the victims. We also find this one. 2023, CAN releases guidelines for voting presidential candidate others. That will be interesting to see. And you also have this one. Police intercept 185 parcels of cannabis in Katsina, neutralize 2 bandits. That's the Nigerian News Direct for you this morning.
Well, certainly those issues are not going to just go away. We have to do our own due diligence to ensure that in the coming elections, our thoughts, our considerations, our decisions are based on informed opinions. Otherwise, hey, at the end of the day, what are we talking about here? Well, that's the papers right now. We take a short break and begin to delve into the issues lined up for the day. Please stay with us.
The roads are lonely, and the silence in the classrooms across public universities in the country is deafening. The classrooms are under lock and key. A peep through the window into the classroom shows dusty chairs and desks, clear evidence that the classrooms have not been used for any academic activities for some time. Students like Feintola Oluwa, a 400-level student of estate management at the Obafemi Awolowo University in Ile-Ife, Osun State, are finding an alternative since she can't be in school due to the industrial action by lecturers.
I started my learning graphic design properly in April. Then I did a lot of personal projects. So I designed a logo for somebody that she's into plants. She sells plants, so I designed a logo for her and I started to post it on Twitter, and from there it blew up. I got a lot of responses.
Like Feintola, the strike is having psychological and financial impact on Prince Agbola, a 400-level law student at the University of Abuja. Thanks to this job in a hotel, he's finding a way to deal with the frustration of idleness.
You can't just stay at home, like you have to go out and hustle. Because the strike, you being at home self alone, depression will just get to you. Like you being at home, depression will get to you. So you have to like go out and hustle. Like I've gone through like different jobs just within the space of this 6-month strike. I've done different jobs. I've worked in the hotel. I've done different things just to make money during the strike. Because it's really bad for like students to be at home during this period.
Jada Christopher, a student of industrial design at the Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, Kaduna State, is also not letting the strike take the shine of her life.
I've been trying to get my hands on some jobs. I have a summer school job in August lined up for me, and I also try to practice some art and craft jobs like painting on materials, painting on clothes, try to work on my aesthetic value on my designs and also how it can be utilized. The government really needs to do something about it because we have to go back to school. We need to go back to school. It's very essential. We need to finish what we already started. We can't be going halfway each and every time we start something. So we beg the government that they should help and do whatever they can so that we can go back to school.
As the saying goes, when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. In this case, the Nigerian students are suffering and they really cannot wait to get back to
Our first conversation right now is about what you have just seen, and recently you also learned that a group known as Concerned Alumni of Nigerian Universities are trying to wade in on this conversation to ensure that ASUU returns to school, the federal government does the needful, whichever way this works for all parties concerned. And of course, you also know that some state governors are also saying, hey, we do what we're supposed to do. Why then are you, on strike when we're not owing you? Well, that and a number of other things you may find in this conversation happening with Malkwe in Abuja.
Thank you, Ayo. Well, on the 14th of this month, that's 14th of September, it will be exactly 7 months since ASUU embarked on this strike. And I don't think that when it started on the 14th of February, a lot of people saw that it was going to be extending till this time, but this is now what we currently have. There have been negotiations back and forth. In some instances, it would seem that progress was being made and light was, appearing almost at the end of the tunnel, but so far so good. Students are still at home. As a matter of fact, last week, ASUU declared an indefinite strike action when it wasn't making the headway that it had hoped that it was going to make in the negotiations. However, a lot of Nigerians are concerned about children still staying at home. Well, they're not exactly babies, but these are people that parents are still responsible for and have to look after, and how this has a general effect on the society at large, people who are not gainfully employed, like the young people whom we've seen in that report, could be up to no good if care is not taken. So we have this morning Dr. Cletus Acquire, who is a former Commissioner for Information, Benue State, and also publisher and editor-in-chief, Daily Asset newspaper. Wading in this morning, I think he also represents a group concerned alumni of Nigerian universities. What exactly is the concern of this particular alumni? And is this just a recent organization? Just curious.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in the ongoing conversation about the prolonged strike by the academic staff union of universities. All of us have been to Nigerian universities or some foreign universities. We belong to one alumni association or the other. I belong to quite a few, having attended my university in Nigeria for the first degree and the higher degrees. So what is happening is of concern to a wide variety of Nigerians across the board. So those of us that attended Nigerian universities are concerned. And so we have come together to raise concern or to join our voices with all the stakeholders to try to ensure that this issue of the prolonged strike by ASUU is resolved. So that is our concern. There must be a time for every course of action. The time that we're in, that the crisis we're facing in the tertiary institutions, particularly in the universities, has called for concerted efforts. And that's why those of us who feel concerned can no longer sit on the fence. We have to participate in the ongoing conversation, make our own contributions to ensure that sanity is restored on the campuses.
Well, for a number of people, I do not know if you have been able to take a look at what ASUU is asking for. I mean, they're not just a frivolous group of people. They won't have just gone on strike just for the heck of it. They've been making some requests or some demands of the federal government before now. It has not been acceded to, and that's the reason why they have embarked on this particular strike. How would you rate the federal government's response to ASUU?
Well, let me make this clarification. I do not think that anybody is taking ASUU for granted in this country. Nobody believes that ASUU's demands, whatever they are frivolous. A lot of us welcome the concern of ASUU for improvement of education in the country, especially university education. Nobody can fault the need to have quality education delivered to our children. Nobody can afford that. And everybody's on the same page with ASUU on the need to improve the delivery of education to our students. However, the methodology adopted to bring these changes to be is what some of us have concern with. You recall that in your opening remarks, you say this strike will hit 7 months in a few days. Yes, today is about 204 days since the strike started. ASUU had laid before the federal government a charter of demands, as I would say. These demands are not exactly new. They are a carryover from the 2009 negotiated agreement with the federal government. You may also recall that in the last 30 years, ASUU has gone on strike in each and every administration that governed this country. And these demands have really not changed. A few have been met, a few not met, but all border on the germane issue of delivery of quality education to our students and welfare of the academic staff. Now, having gone through this route for nearly 30 years, ASUU doesn't appear to be getting to its desired destination. And that is why the strike is continuing now, even indefinitely. So the question is, if we have tried one approach to resolving a problem for nearly 30 years, is it not high time we had a rethink to look at other strategies as well? Because we've used the language of strike all along, and it appears that it's not just the Buhari administration. And let it be clear, I don't work for the government. I'm just a concerned Nigerian about this issue. The ASUU strikes were on in the Jonathan administration. President Obasanjo had his own share of the strikes, and even the previous military administrations had their own share of this. So, should we continue along this line? Now, in the report before this, you showed some young students. They were lucky to be taken to some vocations or some engagements that probably will be able to give them some income. But there are many other youths out there, some students that are staying at home, that have taken to crime. I have an incident in my state where recently some students, some university students who ought to be on campus were involved in a case of kidnapping. And the law in the state requires that any property that has been used for kidnapped victims should be brought down. And the house belonged to a retired jurist who is even late. And the state government ordered the demolition of that house simply because the students had used that structure to keep their victims and demand for ransom. And we can count so many of these instances where students who ought to be on campuses have taken to crime. Now we need to strike a balance. Yes, ASUU wants to improve the quality of learning and the welfare of their members. Nobody is faulting this. Now, the very students they want to protect, the better society they want to build in terms of delivery of quality education is being turned upside down. These same students that we want to mold to better citizens are now taken to crime. So the question is, should we continue on this route? I'm not holding brief for the government, as I said. The government may have met some of the demands of ASUU. You will see that when this strike started, it's not only ASUU that were on strike. You had the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, they were on strike. The Association of University Academicians, they were on strike. And other industrial unions that
I think about 3 of them were on strike.
These unions have called off their strike, and they also gave the federal government 2 months within which to ensure that the issues in contention were being implemented. So they have called off their strike and are waiting 2 months to see that the federal government began the implementation of this. I think with ASUU, one of the most contentious issues now is the issue of whether or not the federal government should pay the arrears of salaries for the time of the strike. I believe this is one of the contentious issues. The other issues would be evidence that the funds are being released to the universities for payment of some of the charges that have been negotiated. I think that the ASUU negotiation with the federal government, they may not have achieved 100%. But I'm sure that a lot of grounds have been covered. And in a negotiation, when you have reached a certain level where you think that you have gained some, you adjust your position so that at least you consolidate on what you have, and then as it is said in the labor movement, the struggle continues. Our take is that the struggle to build a good society, a better society, even the ideal society, if we like, it's not a job that can be done in one day. It's a continuum. It's a continuous process. It cannot be decreed.
Yes.
It evolves.
What I'm curious about is why the appeal of concerned Nigerians is to ASUU. Because ASUU will also argue that they have their children. A lot of the lecturers have their children in these universities where they themselves lecture. That they have not gone on strike for their own benefit. They've gone on strike for the future of Nigeria. Shouldn't we, as a people, be piling pressure on the federal government to see how it can quickly accede to the demands of ASUU. Why do we think ASUU should be the body that we appeal to?
No, nobody is sparing the federal government in this conversation. We are all concerned, and we are appealing to all parties in the dispute to close their ranks. But there's more on the side of ASUU, because ASUU are the people that are on strike. Okay, the federal government is not on strike. The appeal is going to the federal government to also come in to do what they're supposed to do. But a greater appeal is going to ASUU in the sense that in this case, they appear to be holding the yam and the knife, as Africans would say, because as long as they're on strike, the university will remain closed. So this is why the appeal appears to be going more to ASUU. It doesn't mean that the federal government is not being also pressurized upon. There have been a lot of calls on the federal government to attend to the demands of ASUU. But the point we're trying to make here is that, can all of these demands be met in a go? I don't think so. A lot could be done, but to say that the problems of Nigerian universities can be addressed in a go or with one strike is not possible. We're talking about funding, adequate funding of the universities. Now, the reality is very clear to us, and it's very clear to even members of ASUU. When in the 70s and the 80s, you know the statistics, we had an annual intake of less than 100,000 students. Now we have more than 1 million students every year. And you discover that 2022, 2021, and 2020, from all the university tertiary matriculation examination conducted by JAM, over 1 million students participated in these examinations. And that goes to say that over 1 million candidates are awaiting admission. In the last 3 years, most of the universities have not conducted fresh admissions. So we're not even talking about just the students that are already on campus. We're even talking about students that are waiting to even enter into the system. For 3 years, they're at home. So you can imagine the pain of parents, you can imagine the frustration of these young people whom we are also fighting to better their future. So these are the issues. Now, when we talk about adequate funding, can we really found the universities the way that the positions have been laid on the table? It could be done, but can it be done in one day? I don't think so. And this is why we're saying, let us have a way that the universities reopen, while the discussion to implement some of these things that have been agreed continues. It's not as if the federal government, I think the federal government has yielded some grounds. On the areas that have yielded ground, let there be implementation. And then ASUU also reopens the universities, and then let the dialogue continue. Because we are not operating in isolation. We are operating among the Committee of Nations. In other climes, how do we handle dispute between academic staff and students? Most of our colleagues here have gone to foreign universities. Even in African countries, is strike the only language to negotiate? Is strike the only language to get the government to deliver on certain policies? I don't think so. As academics, we should be more ingenious. We should come up with even better strategies and even more modalities. And if we blame the present administration that it is not doing enough, what happened in the Jonathan administration? What happened in the Buhari administration? The Obasanjo administration? What happened in all the previous administrations that these strikes have continued? So the point here is that the strikes, as useful as they are as a tool for negotiation in an event of labor dispute, they are not proven to be giving us the kind of result that we desire. So I think that we should look forward to combining other strategies. How about the future of the universities that is not only hinged on government funding? Can't we look at other models of funding the universities? How about private sector participation in various levels? People have talked about, as a matter of fact, some universities have started involving the private sector in provision of hostels, for instance. Are there no other ways that we can involve the private sector to fund? Should university education be completely free? These are the questions. And even those who went to university in the 70s and the 80s, when tuitions were free, somebody was paying for this. I believe the federal government and the state governments were delivering subsidies to universities for tuition, and the Federal Scholarship Board and the Student Loans Board. Some of these things were in effect. So somebody was paying for this. So university education cannot be completely 100% provided by any government anywhere in the world. The parents must participate, the student must participate, other stakeholders, the private sector, foundations, non-governmental organizations. Most of the universities in advanced countries are they're not even owned by the government. Some of the famous universities are owned by charities and foundations. And so to say that the federal government must fund 100% everything.
Is that what ASUU is saying? We can always confirm from them, but I don't know that that's what ASUU is saying.
Let me make this clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, the Charter of Demands that ASUU has brought forward, why has it been impossible for the federal government to implement this? You cite corruption, you cite inefficiency of government, you cite leakages in revenue, you cite a lack of attention to education, maybe low budgetary provisions, you talk of. All these have been there. Why has it been so? It's a process. We cannot get this thing to be done in one day. And education, we are all involved. It should be given priority. Nobody's faulting ASUU on this. We are just saying that, now, do we start in one place and insist that until all these things are done, progress cannot be made? If all other sectors were to shut down until all these things were done, will any sector be up and going? So this is why we're calling for a rethink. We're calling for a reconsideration on the part of all stakeholders, not just ASUU, but every stakeholder. And when we say stakeholder, it's not only the government and ASUU that are involved. There are many others, the students, the parents, the non-governmental organizations, and every other person is involved.
Okay, let me flip this conversation to Lagos now.
Well,
Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Markwe. Dr. Kwaya, perhaps there is a need for us to even understand what the issues are here, really. When we say funding education, maybe there is a need to really decrypt what we're talking about here. Just yesterday, we had a guest in our studio here who was saying, look, he has a doctorate degree, such as your distinguished self, and he said he regretted having it. He said it on live TV because as far as he is concerned, it didn't look like it has amounted to anything, and he was also talking in the same fray about this ASUU strike and the rest of it. So one is wondering, perhaps there is a need for people to understand exactly what we are talking about when we are talking about funding education, especially tertiary education, for which, case ASUU is fighting. Many lecturers can hardly be able to meet their own needs, personal needs. School infrastructure is decrepit, and there are many who have also looked at the curriculum of the schools and they're wondering exactly how does this take us to the next decade from here. You have been in government and you understand perhaps some of the issues that we're talking about when we're talking about funding education. Maybe there is a need for people to understand, exactly what we are talking about here. This particular conversation that ASUU is on has been on since 2009. And as you rightly said, we have had many strikes way before the Obasanjo government, since way back into the 80s. So maybe there is a need for us to understand what is at risk, what is jeopardized every time we do not allow education to be funded the way it is supposed to be funded, historically and futuristically.
Well, first of all, I have no regret over my own doctorate degree. I earned it at the University of Lagos, and unlike the other person who came on the program to regret, I have no regrets. I'm appreciative of the university system in Nigeria where I got all my degrees. Now, back to the issue that you're talking about, comprehensive funding or decade funding. As you have rightly pointed out, this matter has been on for over 3 decades or more. The quest for ASUU to get the government to fund the universities, and the problem has persisted. What this tells us, what this talks to us is that the problems cannot be solved in a day. The problem, if it has taken over 3 decades, it shows that it is a part of the Nigerian system. Now, you see, our universities, the media, the health sector, and all the other sectors that we have are a reflection of the entire Nigerian society. There's no one sector that is likely to grow faster. Even our security, we blame our security operatives for the insecurity in the country and all of these things, but we cannot go faster than the Nigerian society itself. The Nigerian society is a developing society. It's evolving. There's no sector in this country that you can say is working ideally or is even delivering maximally the way Nigerians would expect. But it's work in progress. That's the point I'm making. So education, you have mentioned deteriorating facilities, absence of infrastructure, and so on and so forth. You are saying just what is there. But then the question is, do we remain in one place? Can't we begin to take steps going forward, begin to make progress, so that at the end we address these issues, we itemize them, we prioritize them, and we address them? But when we just put everything in the basket and insist that unless this is done, we'll not do this, we'll not do this. I think that is where some of us concerned Nigerians are having problems. We respect members of ASUU.
The issue here,
we have been part of the university.
Just 1 second, if you can hear me.
ASUU. We're not against that.
Just 1 second, Dr. Akwaya. As you have said, this issue has been on for decades, and ASUU has been on and off of strike for decades. And now you're saying ASUU should shift ground. That's fine. That's understandable in the interest of national development. Just a second. The question then is, why has it taken governments, successive administration? Government is one. Government is a continuum. Why has it taken government, in your opinion, you have been in government, successive administrations, the challenge, why has it taken them so long to be able to look at the importance of education and give it the priority it deserves in the interest of Nigeria's posterity?
Yes, it has taken the government. We can say government has not done what it should do as far as the education sector is concerned. Can we also talk to other sectors? The story is the same. In the health sector, are we not talking about health tourism in this country, people going out to get health services? You can also talk about insecurity. Are we not getting our ammunitions and everything from abroad? And every other sector you go to. So the issue is that we need to realize that the problems bedeviling Nigeria, the problem impeding Nigeria's progress and development, are not limited to the education sector alone. Education sector is suffering the same way other the health.
But for now, Dr. Akwaya, we are talking about education. So the point just a second, sir. We are talking at this point. At this point, we are talking about education. So yes. So let's just try to focus squarely on that for a bit.
Yes. I'm back to education.
Yes.
We are saying what? Yeah. The point I'm making is that if the language of strike has gone on for over 3 decades, and the government cannot listen, and the government does not listen to do what the ASUU is demanding for, the question is, do we continue to travel on this road? We have applied one solution to a problem for over 3 decades, and it doesn't seem to be working. Can't we try something else? Can't we try other models to bring about the changes that we need or we desire? That's the question.
Well, it's an endless question. Yes,
it's not a but.
Yes, it's an endless question that we for which reason you are here. Actually, there are a number of one or two other things. Just a second. One or two other things that we can take you on.
I don't work in the government, so but I am not a government official. I don't know why it will be. It has taken this, but the point I know as a Nigerian. That is concerned, that is conscious.
We'll come back to some of these other issues, Dr. Akwaya. Just a second. We understand all the issues that you've talked about. You've said that this hasn't been resolved down through the ages, and you are proposing other models. What these other models are, you share with us when we return from this break. Please stay with us.
We had a meeting with government was in June, or May or June, when the chief of staff, the government director, met in a tripartite plus, what they refer to as a tripartite plus meeting. I think early June. We had that meeting, and we agreed that within 6 weeks we reconvene, and the committee will set up in place, will come back and report to us, and we'll take a final decision. But since now, that committee in attendance was the chief of staff, secretary to the federal government, the Sultan of Sokoto, NIREC, the president of CAN, and all the unions. And we met and raised the issues. And they gave the Nimi Breeze Committee time 2 weeks or so to finish the negotiation, gave UTAS, what do you call it, Anida, 3 weeks to finish testing. And we thought that within the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks, this issue they will return back. The chief of staff will reconvene that meeting. Then the strike will call off.
But has that not been overtaken by the Minister of Education taking over negotiations now?
Will you compare a minister, if you look at a committee headed by chief of staff and minister, which one is higher?
Have you met the minister since?
We have not. We have not had any official meeting with him. Nothing. All we had are just unofficial meeting. That is it. Private meeting. That's not official meeting. We have not had any. As a union, we are open to invitation to anybody. We are willing. This issue can be resolved in 1 day. If the government side is sincere, and not just looking for ways either to punish the union or blackmail, as the Minister of Education said, that we want to use this, what we are doing to ASUU, to teach the labor a lesson. You can imagine that. The university are short. You are negotiating with the union and you say, I want to use this particular thing to teach the union a lesson. You can imagine that. So a minister is going to say, students, go and sue your lecturer because government delayed the process. You see, those are the things you should not hear in a sane system.
Thanks for staying with us. Dr. Kwaya, you said that we should attempt to adopt some other models different from the one that we have adopted over the years. Well, I'm wondering what those models are. We have private universities, and there are situations where even the current system that we have, one of the functions that lecturers are supposed to be performing is that of researching. I'm not sure how much they're able to do that in the current space, in the current scheme of things. So in terms of what else they can do, what other model we can adopt for funding tertiary institutions in Nigeria, what's your suggestion?
There are quite a number of models, and I spoke about some of them earlier in this conversation. Over time, ASUU was able to get the federal government bring about independence of the universities. Independence in terms of the universities deciding how they elect their leaders, their vice chancellors, elect their deans and heads of department, and so on and so forth. One way to go is to get to deepen the independence of the federal government on the universities. Government begins to make a gradual withdrawal and allow the universities to take charge of their own activities. By doing so, the university will develop, we gain independence to control their finances and be able to charge relevant fees applicable to their own circumstances so that all stakeholders make contributions. It's not just everything comes from the budget. The students make a contribution, the parents make a contribution, and other stakeholders make a contribution. That is one way to go.
Just 1 second, if you can hear me.
Is to look at...
Just 1 second. Do the laws... My apologies for butting in. Do the laws that set up the universities permit them to go the route that you're talking about?
For most of the reforms that were carried out, it required amendment of the laws. There's nothing that can be done as long as that becomes the government policy and this has been agreed upon by the parties involved. Legislations can be reworked to accommodate the new direction that the country would like to go in attending to this problem. Because as we rightly pointed out, these problems have lingered for long. And I believe that the legislature will be willing and should be willing to participate in this in terms of working out the appropriate legislation that will bring about the changes that we're talking about. We are all concerned about this because we live in this country and all of us agree that education is a bedrock. It requires all hands to be on deck. So my take is that it's not a question of shift or apportioning blames. As we are pointing the accusing finger to one quarter, some other fingers may be pointing to you. So it requires all stakeholders to be on board. It's not a matter of we versus them. I think this is what has complicated the issues towards finding more enduring solutions to the challenges that we face on the campuses.
And that's where I'd like to come in, Dr. Akwanga.
And the new approaches, and we're not lacking new approaches. I believe it is the willpower to implement from all parties. It's not just the government. All parties must agree that the language of strike and continuous strike has not gotten government to do the needful. What else should we do?
You talked about apportioning blames, and that's where I'd like to come in, Dr. Akwaya, particularly to refer to, some of your submissions on the ASUU strike. I recall earlier that you said that no one is taking ASUU for granted, really. And I'd like to, and you also talked about how our government has shifted grounds, has met some of ASUU's demands, but that would not be capturing what is happening accurately, because ASUU is saying that all contentions issues between government and ASUU is not true that they have been settled. For instance, ASUU says none of the issues that forced our union to resume the suspended strike as listed in December 2020 MOU has been satisfactorily addressed by government. ASUU is saying that the issue of IPs and UTAs has not been resolved. And you heard the president saying a while ago how the Minister of Education, his approach has not been satisfactory. So really, let's put it in proper perspective. It's not as if anyone is holding brief for ASUU, but would you say that the attitude of the managers of government deployed to handle the ASUU strike has helped in any way to end the strike? Asked differently, why has the strike continued for 7 months now? We're counting by September the 14th.
Yeah, I think that is part of the problem since this strike commenced. The issue of the conduct of government officials. There have been complaints by ASUU members of government officials either talking down on the leaders of ASUU or making inflammatory comments. I think all of these issues about commentary is all about negotiation. That is the language of negotiation. This is a dispute. It's a trade dispute. There's a dispute. And all the stakeholders, you also get members from both sides make comments. It's either way. But these comments are all geared towards trying to arrive at a solution. So I don't think we should be distracted by the body language or the comments made by government officials, no matter how hostile they might be. Let us look at the issue. Let us be focused on the issue so that we don't get distracted about the disposition or the comment made by a particular government official or the other. Let's return to the issues that when you say satisfactorily met, this is a matter of expectation. It's a matter of expectation. ASUU has an expectation, and they are entitled to that. But in life, are all your expectations met all the time? The answer is no. They have expectation. That is legitimate. They should have expectation. We want them to have expectation. But if the expectations are not met, what else can you get in the circumstance so that progress can be made? That is why we that are concerned alumni are appealing that this matter be looked at again. Let there be a reconsideration so that the students that we want to protect can go back. The stay at home is becoming far too long, and the future of the students is being compromised. This is where we're coming from.
Dr. Kwaya, is it about us being distracted by the issues, or those who are supposed to be negotiating really are the ones distracted? I.e., now to be specific, now the government officials. So it's not about you and I making this conversation on the on both ends, of the platform, but about those who are supposed to be negotiating. What should you be telling them right now so that they will not be distracted and they'll get back to the negotiating table and begin to talk?
Well, as we heard from the ASUU president, several meetings have been held. I don't work in the government, but I'm in the media. And when these meetings are held, we get to know that meetings are taking place. The details of the negotiations, since fresh agreements have not been signed, discussions are ongoing, it is difficult to say this is what has been considered in concrete terms, but definitely I know that both sides have made concessions. And it began, as I said earlier, with the non-academic staff and the other unions. Those have reached some reasonable level of agreement and have called off their strike. I believe also that ASUU has also achieved some grounds. It couldn't have been zero. There's no way this strike would not have achieved something. It couldn't be zero. But since the agreements have not been reached, it is difficult for anyone who is not on the negotiating table to pinpoint on the specific things that may have been agreed upon. I don't work in the government. I'm only a concerned alumnus of the Nigerian university system who is coming in to make a case that let there be restoration of activity for our children to resume school. So it is up to the stakeholder. We are encouraging them. We're encouraging both the government, we're encouraging ASUU to narrow their differences.
Some people will
get this right.
We're all members of that concerned alumni. I mean, if you were to look at majority of Nigerians who have been through the tertiary education system, we all should be members of your concerned alumni group, and I think you will have an expanded membership. But, you know, there might be different perspectives in terms of how people see this ASUU problem. I mean, especially this with the strike. You have said that when you look at both sides, you think that ASUU has the greatest burden because, according to you, they hold both the yam and the knife. Some people would say they don't see it that way. As you rightly pointed out, we are not privy to the discussions. But so far, so good. Nobody has been able to say, this is what the Minister of Education said with regards to the negotiations that have gone on with ASUU. We rarely see that he grants any interviews based on what they are negotiating with ASUU. The only thing that really comes to mind in recent memory is when he spoke to State House correspondents at the weekly briefing of ministers and other government agencies. We haven't seen that engagement from the part of government, especially the Minister of Education, talking to parents or trying to even say, this is where we are with negotiations, or even students, for instance, to address them. Doesn't that bother you?
Well, I cannot hold brief for the Honorable Minister of Education.
I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you as a concerned Nigerian, if that doesn't bother you at all.
What I can say is that from the public space, what we understood all that these negotiations were holding with the Minister of Labour when the strike started. And as the President has informed us, other stakeholders, other eminent Nigerians were also brought on the table. So I think the problem has gone well beyond and out of the bowels of the Ministry of Education alone. All the stakeholders are on the table now. The Minister of Labour has been involved. The President, you heard him on the earlier report, that the Sultan of Sokoto, the President of Khan, and other stakeholders were brought in. That means the negotiation has gone to a level that is even higher. And he said they even made the Chief of Staff. So the negotiations have gone way beyond even the Minister of Education.
So all of these negotiations can be happening, but have you seen any deliberate act on the part of government to keep Nigerians abreast of what the negotiations have been able to achieve? All we have been able to see so far is ASUU still constantly engaging with the public, because a lot of people are asking ASUU, oh, please shelve your strike. Oh, please shelve your strike. And ASUU, every time you invite them, they're willing to engage. They always come and state where they are. But have you seen how active government has been in engaging the public? Would you say that they have been active at all?
No, you see, let us understand the modus operandi of trade union or trade unions or labor movements. ASUU is the aggrieved party in this case. And so they have the honors to always aid their grievances, and they're entitled to that. They need the public to know what their grievances are. They are the ones that need to explain why they're on strike. And that is why you see them occupying more public space in terms of engaging the media, in terms of speaking about progress being made, and so on. But the government on the other side is a party to the dispute, and is the government that the ASUU is approaching with their demands. So the honors have been more on ASUU to explain its action, why it's on strike, what the demands is making, why progress has not been made, what the strike cannot be called of. This is why, as you see, ASUU being more visible in the public space.
So perhaps that your explanation makes sense, but you are a former commissioner for information, and you once advised the state on how to manage its own information. would you say that you're pleased with how the federal government has managed information with regards to its negotiations with ASUU?
Well, this is a matter of public assessment. So,
that's what I'm asking you for. For your own assessment, are you satisfied?
No, everyone with his own opinion about. But I'm not here to assess the federal government. I'm not here to assess ASUU. I'm not here to assess anybody. I'm here to make an intervention, to make an appeal. And that is why we are saying that we're not taking ASUU for granted. Nobody is saying that ASUU does not have a point it's making in terms of its charter of demands. No, we are saying that the methodology being adopted, we are saying that the language of the strike that is unending, that is becoming counterproductive, that can we have a rethink? Can we look at other approaches? And your colleague asked me, what are other approaches? And I tried to canvass some of them. We could canvass more if time permits. But this is the direction that we want this matter to be resolved. We cannot remain in dispute forever, and the universities are locked down. We are appealing as an alumni organization that we are concerned. So it's not about coming to assess whether government machinery is working well or not, or whether ASUU is doing. We are saying, look, let there be a narrowing of differences. We are here as conciliators, so it is not to apportion blame. I've said that over and over again. It is because if we do so, we're not standing in between the disputants. Okay. Our role is not to come and add petrol and kerosene to the flames. Our role is to come and make appeal to conscience, appeal to morality, appeal to goodness, appeal to a sense of reasoning of the plight of the students that have been outside. Can't we just have a think for our students? You have already said the students of the children of ASUU members on our campuses, and they are also at home. It is true. So we are all involved. So for the sake of the future of our children, this is the point that we are making.
Well, fair enough. It's a fair enough point. I'm sure that, members of ASUU, individual members, might be watching you this morning, and maybe it might also spur another conversation, who knows. But when I asked you to do an assessment, I mean, oftentimes, even when parents want to scold children, they will, or even reconcile them, they will give you your own, where you've gone wrong, and give you a point where you can both reconcile, But we have to thank you so much.
Yeah, but the point before we round up, discipline and adjudication of disputes at family level is a different thing. We're talking of
if you say so, Dr. Akwaya,
macro environment that the whole Nigerian society
if you say so,
is involved.
But we have to go now. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts this morning. He is a former commissioner for information in Benue State and also publisher, editor-in-chief of Daily Asset newspaper. But he's appearing here this morning as a member of the concerned alumni of Nigerian University, is appealing to ASUU to call off its now almost 7-month-old strike. Thank you once again for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. We'll take a break now. We'll be back shortly to discuss a number of other issues, amongst which is the recent visit of the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, to the United States. Please stay with us.
Most certainly, everyone believes that the catalyst, the major catalyst to developing or jump-starting Nigeria's economy, or even developing it, whatever you want to do about Nigeria's economy, energy is most certainly going to play a significant role. Two gentlemen join us this morning to discuss this, especially the Vice President's visits to the United States. Of course, you can see on your screen right now, Olubola Mark George is Climate Finance Advisor to the Federal Government of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Well, before Mr. Akoni joins us, perhaps there is a need for an understanding of exactly what we're talking about now when we talk about the energy transition plan. This is the reason for the Vice President going to the United States of America. There have been several conversations about that. In a nutshell, can you make it nursery school level for us to understand?
Okay, I'll give a bit of context in that, and thank you very much for having me on. Energy is a very important source, and it's what we all utilize, it's what we all see. Now, basically, in 1999, we had a position where the world came together and recognized very clearly that there were issues with climate change, okay? And we needed to do certain things. The world was warming, and as it was warming, it meant that there were going to be effects that would naturally take a change. And what was causing this effect were fossil fuel use, CO2 emissions. Now, in trying to change that narrative, a limit was set of 1.5 degrees of warming over time. Now, to prevent that happening, we have to change the way we generate power and how we create energy. So that means that, coal, oil, et cetera, needs to change. We need to have a change of attitude as a global collective, as the world. And that's what this is about. So for Nigeria in particular, we have to have a transition. We have our generation capacity is primarily hydro and gas. And so we have to look at that. And then we also are an economy that's dependent upon oil. Again, a dirty fuel. And so if we look at it, these are the things that we have to look at in terms of an economy and say, what happens? We have our revenues, 90% of our revenues globally are from oil. Now, oil is classed as a dirty fuel, and we can't use it. So we have to transit. We have to change our economy. You'll have heard the president and the vice president who leads the economic team talk about for the last 8 years, changing and diversifying our economy. It's a narrative that's been spoken about all my life, 50 years plus. But we have to do it, and the incentive is now. So the energy transition plan is very simple. How do we transit our economy, right, from dependence upon oil and into other factors for energy that is required to industrialize? Because we still have to be an industrial economy. So that's the plan. And how do we go across? So it has been broken down into various different sectors.
But that is, even the plan is not new. Right here in my hand is a document dated 2014, the National Energy Master Plan.
Yes.
So it's not like it is something that is new. We've been talking about it for eons. So what's new this time? Okay.
So again, in 2014, we had an energy master plan. And how do we implement that? We've had a plan that aligned. But if you recall, in 2015, the Paris Agreement came into force. And the Paris Agreement had been in discussion since 1999. And it was a global collective that this was how we were going to do it. Developed countries, developing countries, low-income countries across the world. And this was a very clear thing where we committed. And that was where we came to what is called, nationally determined contributions to greenhouse gases. So we had to revise the energy master plan, which was written in 2014, to start to align. And we had to create a renewable energy policy. And that's where we have gone through. We've created a renewable energy policy. We've created a new energy master plan. Now, the energy transition plan is a fallout to say we get to what is called net zero by 2060. Along the pathway is what we've just done in 2021, is a revision of our NDCs, nationally determined contributions. So we've said this is how we're going to go by 2030 and then by 2060. So it's a clear, implementable plan to take us 4 sectors. Very, very clear. It must be very important that the master plan for energy must also take into account the industrial sectors that we have. That's what has happened.
So let's go there to those industrial sectors. I see that part of the timeline and framework for the reduction of emissions across 5 sectors. Power, cooking, oil and gas, transport, and industry. Generally speaking, the question of affordability and accessibility come tops.
Okay. So affordability and accessibility. That's one of the reasons why we are rejigging. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking at how we access and what type of funds we have. Part of the commitments that was made globally was that we would have 100 billion would be spent by developed countries and would be allocated to less developed and middle income countries for transition, for mitigation and adaptation projects to help them transit. Now, that was supposed to have been delivered by 2025, but it hasn't. And we're waiting for that to happen. We're about $83 billion has been committed. So those are the issues that make the transition and the trip that His Excellency took of utmost importance. That we cannot afford to stop or change. So we have to go it. How do we make it accessible? We have to have programs, and that's why it's called a just energy transition. So it must be equitable. It must bring into play mitigation issues. It must bring, more importantly, adaptation issues. Not to be technical, I probably presume that the next question is what is mitigation and what is adaptation?
Well, not quite, because I'm still, my head is still stuck in the affordability space. Why? Because I think it was during COVID 2020 that the Minister of State for Petroleum was advocating, look, while fuel prices are low now, can we begin a transition to gas, using gas for our automobiles and stuff like that? Some industries can use gas, and all of those things. That's on the one hand for the big boys, it would seem. But for cooking, I'm wondering how you're going to persuade, I don't know, maybe your grandmom is still, how you're going to tell her to transit to gas and, my grandmom, old people, rural areas and all of those things to transit from firewood and the rest of them to clean energy that we are advocating here. The cost of it, on the one hand, is one of the issues in my head, as well as the access to it for them. Okay,
so you've just hit on one of my specialist areas, which is clean cooking. So indoor air pollution, right, and inhaled gases is the 3rd highest killer in Nigeria. So your clean cooking is critical to your healthcare, is critical to your livelihoods, is critical to your survival as a nation. Let me reverse that. Indoor air pollution is what? Mama, 3-stone fire, and cooking. Using kerosene, black charcoal pots. That's, when you look at those charcoal pots, that's the lungs. That's what happens. So that's what we're talking about. So accessibility comes along the way of how do you change. Now, there are 2 things. Today, there are many clean cooking firewood or coal burning stoves that reduce the emissions. That's the first start. And they're inexpensive relative to your kerosene or your basic, 3 rings. They're inexpensive and they can be financed. I was privileged to run a microfinance bank where we did that financing and we ran a project in the north of Nigeria across several different states. Which was successful. So it can be pushed out there. It's a question of how do we make it a norm and how do we put it into the value chain. Again, that's why we have to have institutional programs. Part of the ERGP that His Excellency put together had clean cooking in there for that purpose, clean cooking stoves. You institutionalize it, put it into our boarding schools, put it into it and change the difference. Now, gas. Gas is our transition. Nigeria is a gas nation, and we have so much gas. We now have to work with the gas commercialization plan to have gas everywhere, but also to work and have what we call little nodes, hubs, and create those places where you transit and you have the gas cylinders. Retail gas is clearly something that we can actually do.
Okay. Still on how it's going to go around, that's where my concern is. You've talked a lot about gas. Let's not look at power. Some of the proposals that have been, struck in the past where debt for climate change is concerned is done with the institutions, helping, for instance, the PHCN in the country to transit from hydro to other cleaner forms of energy. So what's the proposal that the federal government is making with its partners such that institutions can be helped to transit? Okay,
so Nigeria as a nation is looking at an energy compact. We already have one which we initially signed, but we're looking at saying, look, there's energy transition today, there's 23 billion that we have looked at, that are clear projects that we can start off with today as demonstrations. We actually need over 560 billion investment and financial flows for our total transition, okay? And that's by 2030, if we were to go for everything we needed to do today. That you can't afford. So how do we do it? How do we balance it up? How do we look at it? Today we have a debt to GDP ratio, which is within the norms, within the prescribed norms, under the 35%. However, our debt to revenue ratio has, as was recently pointed out, reached sky high, close to 100%, and in some cases in a month or two ago, over that. So it's very critical that we don't have a headroom to go through. The physical space is very tight. So what do we need to do? We need to reverse that. We can't be servicing debt and not meeting capital and physical projects to keep us alive and to keep us going, because eventually it will lead to an illiquid state and will not be sustainable. So in discussions, what we're proposing is to, one, start off with an energy compact, which says, look, these are the projects, these are the things that we need to finance, and they're clear. And we have already proven, we've had 2 green bonds, and we were looking at our 3rd green bond, where we've shown that we can do this. So these are the projects, these are the ways to go. Okay. Work with us. And that's what we're talking to, and that's what His Excellency was saying, come along the way. The World Bank have already indicated some interest, and other parties.
Okay. Well, so much to unpack in all of these, but as we mentioned earlier, Laolu Akonde has just joined us. He's Senior Special Assistant, Media and Publicity in the Office of the Vice President. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Akonde. Well, we've been having fun before you joined the party, but you're not too late. Now, the natural word that will come as a media person to you is, how do we sell these to the people? At the end of the day, it is about ownership by the people. Most times, government policies, laudable as they may be, they are just there in the offices. Many may just be hearing, for instance, about the Energy Master Plan of 2014 for the first time. And of course, we're talking about the Energy Transition Plan now. So, and it's a 40-year journey, it would seem. How do we begin the journey of helping people to take ownership of this?
Thank you, Hayo, for having me. I think the simple answer to that is by getting the job done. Look, what we are talking about here, we are dealing with 2 crises, like the Vice President has often explained. So we have the climate change challenges. We have to make our heart more habitable. And so to do that, we have to reduce fossil fuels and the emissions, okay? So Nigeria has signed up for that because that is one crisis by itself. But the other crisis that we also deal with is a crisis of talking about energy specifically, the crisis of access, what the Vice President has called energy poverty. And so what the energy transition plan has done is to put the two together and say, look, we can achieve both of these. We can begin to reduce, significantly our emissions, and at the same time, use what is available, in this case, specifically gas, mostly, to also increase energy access, to industrialize and increase energy access, including other renewables like solar. So the answer to your question, Ayo, is that we're going to get it done. These are imperatives that has to be accomplished. We have obligations internationally. We have obligations to our people. We need to electrify more of our communities. We need to bring a lot of our people into some kind of energy access. For instance, under the Solar Niger Power, which came under the Economic Sustainability Plan, you remember that there's a plan to have 5 million solar connection that is going on, and that will bring 25 million people into having energy access. So the answer is that we're going to be getting it done, and as we are doing it, our people will begin to see it, like they're already seeing in some of the places where this is already in operation, and internationally. The world is beginning to understand that Nigeria does have a plan, a solid plan, a data-based plan, the first of its kind in Africa, to live up to our obligations, our international obligations regarding climate change issues, and at the same time bring our people more energy access.
Things you're talking about here now, but let me speak to the second one you just raised, which is the climate change aspect of this conversation. Now, part of the trip that the Vice President made to the U.S. included a debt for climate swap. Most are hearing about that for the first time. It's essentially asking for some measure of debt forgiveness. Now, there are those who are wondering, we had one before, and now we're asking for another one. First of all, the propriety of it, and then secondly, exactly how will we sustain that so we don't find ourselves in a situation where we're asking for another debt forgiveness of sorts?
So the way I see the debt for climate swap, the deal that the Vice President has put forward, is actually a win-win for all involved. Okay, so it's a win-win for the international community that is committed to making all these climate change adaptations, that is committed, along with Nigeria, to reducing emissions and fossil fuels. And then it's a win for us because the way I understand the debt for climate deal, and I think Mr. McGeorge has done an excellent job to explain it for that, is that we are going to be using, once this is accepted and is in play, we will be getting credit for some of the debts that we have, especially the debt servicing. Okay, so Nigeria will be, and other countries that get into this, they'll be writing off the debt service obligations. So that is going to give us some debt relief, and it will increase our revenue space, because we will then be spending less on payment for the debt. So it is a win-win situation, and that is how it works. So the Global North gets the credit because they have commitments also that they have made regarding how they will support. They will support climate change adaptations in developed countries, whether at the level of the government, and also big companies that are also emitting quite a number of fuel. So So they can get the credit in that they are forgiving part of our debt in recognition of what government is doing to be climate change adaptable, if I can use that word.
Okay.
So it is a win-win for everybody, if you see what I mean.
Well, most certainly a win. If we're not spending money we don't need to spend. But then, and I know that Mr. Mark George would also want to speak to that, but we need to take a short break. When we return, more on that. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Mark George, you want to, add a word or two to what Mr. Akande said?
Well, certainly. Mr. Akande has pointed out how it goes, and it's very clear. If we have additional, revenues that we get debt forgiveness from, it goes to these allocated specific projects. One of the things we've done is create a climate finance database of specific projects which we've utilized to map for every single MDA in the country, in the federal service, 4 very, very clear projects for us to do. So that clearly states that we can take that money and allocate it and improve our lives. Now, let me go to the question, you had mentioned and said we had done this before. Yes, we have done this before, and we had a debt swap, under Mrs. Okonjo-Iweala, and where we had a 40% haircut, and we saved 18 billion at the time. What was that money used for? It was put into a special recovery account for the MDGs. So we've done this before and proven the model for success, and we can do the same thing again. And that's what we're talking about. Now, we're also saying,
The question then is, how well did we do with those MDGs?
Well, the reports are there to say that, and there is success that can be demonstrated in what has happened with the MDGs. And as you know, the MDGs became the SDGs, which we are now 7 years out. We must, even if we don't achieve 100% success on a target, we have moved the needle, and we have moved significantly.
But not to belabor the point, just to ask that how are our creditor countries and institutions receiving this? Because debt for climate swap is usually given to countries who have are able to pay their debt. But Nigeria is currently borrowing to service debt. That's getting into debt to service debt.
So that's exactly why we need to do it. So, let me explain the reason why we're here. I think it's very critical. We had COVID, right? And the G20 recognized the challenge, and they created something called the Debt Service Sustenance Initiative. So, that DSSI was targeted at low-income countries, highly indebted, poor countries, HIPC countries, and Nigeria obviously couldn't qualify for that. And that was a debt suspension. It was only a suspension that lasted for a year. So you still owe, and you're just not paying. It's just putting off the evil day for a season. Now, middle-income countries, right, which account for 70 to 80% of the total debt stock in the world, of which we are part of, didn't qualify for that. Now, with COVID led to an economic downturn, which we all know, and then climate issues also arose. And we had 2020 was the second warmest year in the entire Earth on record, and we're looking at 2022 already breaking records as we speak. So it's clearly a problem. We've just seen the United States put out a climate compact, again, of how many billion? Now, third, we now have Ukraine, and the economic influence is there. So there are 3 major headwinds that we're facing as middle-income countries, especially us in the South here, and Nigeria in particular. Nigeria is a highly vulnerable country to climate change issues, and we have physical space that is very limited, as I've already spoken about. That's why we need to do this. Now, the question in terms of reception, countries have committed that they will do X, Y, Z, but they haven't been able to do it because they are also in problems. So we have to be creative and come to an agreement. That's what this debt for climate, is about. You say you are going to give us, and you commit to giving us, take a figure, 10 billion. But you can't give us that 10 billion because you are also now, globally, we've had those 3 events I've just talked about. So you don't even have the physical space yourself. So why should I try and keep on paying you, right, When you yourself said you were going to give me money from the money I'm giving. So let's be realistic. Let's be, make it nice and simple. I owe you. I'm supposed to pay you, but you are supposed to also give me aid and give me to help me out of this game. Let's do some net offs. Let's sit down and work it out. That makes it nice and simple.
The question then is, what is that going to cost Nigeria eventually? But let's take this to Mark, she has a question or two for you.
Indeed, my question is for Mr. Laolu Akonde. I wanted to ask him about how, we did see the Vice President in the United States with Vice President Kamala Harris, and there were questions. She had very great words for Nigeria and how it's already started its energy transition plan. And I know that part of the reason why the Vice President visited the U.S. was because he was also trying to get the initial $10 billion, which we're hoping to use to kickstart this energy transition plan. How did that go?
Oh, thank you, Mark. So the VP had a series of meetings last week in Washington, D.C. He met with the World Bank president and some of the leaders from IMF. He met with the Secretary for Treasury, Madam Janet Yellen. Met with Samantha Powers, who is the United States Agency for International Development Administrator. And of course, also met Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, and essentially, it was showcasing the energy transition plan. And every meeting that they went, the reception and the responses have been quite impressive. Now you remember that the previous week, just before he traveled to the US, the energy transition plan had been launched. And at the launching, we already had commitments of about $3 billion to support the plan. So you had $1.5 billion from the World Bank and another $1.5 billion being completed by a US company, Sun Africa. Now, so his meetings went very well. A lot of promises have been made to review the energy transition plan and to see how it is that we can have collaborations, which we need, whether it's on the debt for climate deal, that the Vice President is proposing, or how to open up the carbon markets to African countries so that we can get credits, for some of the pro-climate change developments that we do. And one of the interesting things that happened in the White House meeting was that, of course, it turned out that both vice presidents, were formerly attorneys general of big states in the country. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, former Attorney General in Lagos State, and Vice President Kamala Harris, former Attorney General of California. So, beyond the official interactions, you could also observe that, they hit it off and had a very interesting chemistry and very, very, very useful meeting. So essentially, this plan, the energy transition plan, is getting a lot of positive reviews, and we are very confident that not only with some of these proposals, DFC and all of it, not only will it go through for Nigeria, but it will be very helpful to African countries and several other developing countries of the world.
So it was useful, but we do not have anything concrete yet.
Well, we actually, went ahead of that trip with a $3 billion commitment, which I spoke of, which were announced at the launch, and in meetings with the World Bank, meetings with US officials, it was clear, that they welcome and appreciated the thoroughness of the Nigerian energy transition plan. As a matter of fact, Samantha Powers, spoke very delightedly about, the debt for climate swap. I was saying that she found it to be fresh thinking and something that is worth taking a good look at. And just like Mr. Mark George has said, a lot of these developed countries already have commitments that they themselves are not be able to meet up to. So the debt for climate deal seems to offer a win-win solution for everybody.
Okay, let me pose this to Mr. Mark George about what exactly is new about our gas plan. Because already for our electricity, we know that gas is what we now, well, yes, we have hydro, but gas was one of the projects that the Obasanjo administration, embarked upon, and one of the things that we now rely on. In fact, it's been more consistent, it would seem, than our hydro, which is subject to the vagaries of weather. Just wondering what's going to be different, because right now we're still facing the challenges of how our electricity companies have been, I don't want to use the word balkanized, but you know how we have generation separate from transmission and distribution, and how all of that is giving us a problem in terms of being able to tidy all three together and ensure that Nigerians have the power that they need. What is going to be really different about this gas, which we're now talking about, to really get electricity to the homes of Nigerians who need it?
Okay, thank you very much. The energy transition is a holistic approach that also involves public-private partnerships at a higher level. You've talked about the separation, the GenCos, distribution, and the transmission. One of the things that has just happened, probably rarely know, is that the government, there's an allowance now, a change in the ESPR that allows, transmission to happen, from privates, by states. So that is going to unbundle the current process that you have, where we have only one grid. So we can have, mini grids that are interconnected, or localized regional grids, which will enable that to happen. In terms of gas, the gas commercialization plan by the NNPC is being implemented. However, we do require significant funding to create an interconnected set of pipelines for transmission of gas that we have. And that's critical. We need to critically plan that and put that out there, so that the gas that we have that is trapped will be adequately transmitted across the nation.
It goes back to the question that we've asked before, and it's not a question to answer now because we've completely run out of time.
Yes.
That of accessibility and affordability. And then you've also talked about the fact that we need $500 and something billion over the next 40 thereabout years, and here we are. Anyway, it's the beginning of conversations. We want to have to thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for being here. Olubola Mark George is Climate Finance Advisor to the Federal Government of Nigeria. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
As well as Laolu Akonde, Senior Special Assistant, Media and Publicity in the Office of the Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Akonde, for being a part of our conversation today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And with that, we have come to the end of Sunrise Daily this morning. Many thanks.
Take messages?
We have messages?
Yes, indeed. We have messages.
Okay.
Let's start with Enyoma Daniel. Enyoma Daniel is talking about the energy transition plan, and he says, these plans on energy transition are laudable, but unfortunately, they're alien to majority of the ordinary Nigerians. The core issues are awareness, affordability, and buying in. Until it gets down to the people at affordable rates, I think it will still be far. Yeah, well, you're thinking our thoughts exactly. Enyoma, thank you for your message.
This one is from Tukula. Nigerians should hold the federal government responsible, he says, for the ongoing strike and stop blaming ASUU. The union has done its best for the country by accepting to starve for the sake of having a functional university system. What else do you need from ASUU?
And this email is from John Ugola, who says there is no doubt that the demands of ASUU for a better educational system in Nigeria is so germane to national development, but the timing of this current indefinite strike is a concern, considering the dwindling revenue of Nigeria and the ongoing electioneering for 2023. It is not certain if the federal government can meet the ASUU demands before the end of the current administration. Therefore, it is strongly recommended that ASUU should please suspend the strike and engage with the frontline presidential candidates to secure some commitment on putting solution to this lingering problem as one of the strategic priorities of the incoming administration in 2023. God bless Nigeria, and the church says amen.
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 Thank you so much for your feedback this morning. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate your time with us. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
Indeed, thank you for watching. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Have a splendid and safe day. I'm Ayo Makinde.